The next morning arrived with clear skies and perfect weather, as if the universe itself was setting the stage for what was about to unfold at Sterling Motors. Maya chose her outfit carefully, selecting an elegant black dress and pearls that Marcus had given her for their anniversary. She wanted to look the part of what she truly was. Even though yesterday they had failed to see it, Marcus dressed in his finest suit, the one he typically reserved for board meetings and major business presentations. As they prepared to leave, he made one final phone call to his assistant, confirming that everything was in place for their arrival. "The car should be arriving any moment," Marcus told Maya as they stood in their driveway. "Are you ready for this?" Maya took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of anticipation and resolve flowing through her veins. "I've been ready since yesterday afternoon." Right on schedule, a pristine white Rolls-Royce Phantom glided silently into their driveway. The vehicle was a masterpiece of automotive engineering, its chrome fixtures gleaming like mirrors and its presence commanding immediate attention. Behind the wheel sat James, Marcus's personal driver for the past 5 years, dressed immaculately in a crisp uniform. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson," James said as he stepped out to open their doors. "I trust you're ready to make an impression." Marcus smiled grimly. "Oh, we're going to make an impression, all right." The drive to Sterling Motors took 20 minutes, during which Maya watched the familiar scenery pass by with new eyes. Yesterday, she had made this journey full of excitement about surprising her husband. Today, she was returning as part of a carefully orchestrated demonstration of power and principle. As they approached the dealership, Maya could see the same gleaming showroom that had seemed so impressive yesterday. Now it looked different to her, less like a temple of luxury and more like a stage where an important lesson was about to be taught. "Remember," Marcus said as they pulled into the parking lot, "let me handle the talking initially. We want them to understand exactly who they're dealing with before we address what happened yesterday." The Rolls-Royce came to a perfect stop directly in front of the main entrance to Sterling Motors. James stepped out immediately and moved to open the passenger doors with practiced precision. Several people in the parking lot stopped what they were doing to stare at the magnificent vehicle and its occupants. Maya emerged from the car with grace and dignity, her head held high as she surveyed the dealership that had humiliated her less than 24 hours earlier. Marcus joined her, and together they walked toward the entrance with the confidence of people who owned the world. The same blonde receptionist was at her desk when they entered, but her reaction today was completely different. Her eyes widened as she took in the sight of Marcus and Maya, clearly recognizing that these were not ordinary customers. She straightened in her chair and put on her most professional smile. "Good morning. Welcome to Sterling Motors," she said in a voice that was warm and respectful, a stark contrast to her tone from the previous day. "How may I assist you today?" Marcus approached the desk with measured steps, his presence filling the room with an aura of authority that was impossible to ignore. "I'd like to speak with Richard Sterling, please. Tell him Marcus Johnson is here to discuss a potential purchase." The receptionist's training kicked in as she recognized the importance of the request, even though the name Marcus Johnson didn't immediately register with her. "Certainly, sir. Let me call Mr. Sterling right away." Within moments, Richard Sterling appeared from his office, drawn by the prospect of a major sale. He was wearing his most expensive suit and his biggest smile, ready to charm what he clearly assumed were wealthy customers. His eyes focused on Marcus first, taking in the obvious quality of his clothing and bearing. "Mr. Johnson, what a pleasure to meet you," Sterling said, extending his hand with practiced enthusiasm. "I understand you're interested in one of our vehicles." Marcus shook the offered hand with a firm grip, his dark eyes studying Sterling's face intently. "That's correct. I'm looking to purchase something special. Perhaps several vehicles, actually." Sterling's smile grew even broader. "Excellent. You've come to the right place. Sterling Motors offers the finest selection of luxury automobiles in the region. What type of vehicle were you considering?" "Actually," Marcus said calmly, "before we discuss that, I'd like you to meet my wife." For the first time since their arrival, Sterling's attention shifted to Maya. His eyes scanned her face, and Maya watched with satisfaction as recognition slowly dawned in his expression. The color began to drain from his cheeks as the memory of yesterday's encounter came flooding back. "I believe you two met yesterday," Marcus continued, his voice remaining perfectly pleasant while his eyes grew cold as ice. "My wife was interested in purchasing a BMW as a gift for my birthday. She tells me you weren't very helpful." Sterling's mouth opened and closed several times as he struggled to find words. The confident salesman had vanished, replaced by a man who was clearly beginning to understand the magnitude of his mistake. I'm not sure I understand," Sterling stammered. Though it was obvious he understood perfectly, Maya stepped forward, her voice clear and steady. "Yesterday you had me escorted out of your showroom by security. You told me I couldn't afford your vehicles and suggested I try a used car lot downtown." The showroom had grown quiet as other customers and staff members sensed the tension in the air. Several people had stopped pretending to look at cars and were openly watching the drama unfold. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Sterling the screen, which displayed a Forbes article about Johnson Industries and its CEO. "Perhaps you're familiar with my company?" Sterling's face went from pale to ashen as he read the headline. "Marcus Johnson, Tech Mogul's company hits record $50 billion valuation." His hands began to shake as the full implications of the situation became clear. "Mr. Johnson, there must be some misunderstanding," Sterling said desperately. "I would never. That is, we pride ourselves on excellent customer service for all our clients." "All your clients?" Maya asked pointedly. "Because yesterday you made it very clear that I wasn't welcome here. You assumed I couldn't afford your vehicles based solely on my appearance." Marcus stepped closer to Sterling, his voice dropping to a tone that made everyone in the showroom strain to hear. "Let me be very clear about what's going to happen here. My wife experienced blatant racial discrimination at your establishment yesterday. She was humiliated and treated like a criminal for the crime of shopping while black." "Sir, please, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding," Sterling pleaded, sweat beginning to form on his forehead. "The only misunderstanding," Marcus replied, "is your assumption that my wife was someone you could treat poorly without consequences. You see, Mr. Sterling, I didn't build a $50 billion company by accepting unacceptable behavior." The showroom was now completely silent except for Marcus's voice. Even the background music seemed to have stopped as everyone absorbed what was happening. "I came here today prepared to purchase every BMW on your lot," Marcus continued. "I was going to buy them as gifts for my employees and donate them to charitable organizations. That would have been approximately $3 million in sales for your dealership." Sterling's eyes widened as he calculated the lost revenue. His breathing became shallow as he realized the full cost of his prejudice. "However," Marcus said, "I've decided that money would be better spent at a dealership that treats all customers with respect, regardless of their race or appearance." Maya watched Sterling's face as the reality of his situation sank in. This wasn't just about losing one sale. This was about the potential destruction of his business's reputation. Marcus Johnson was not just wealthy. He was influential, with connections throughout the business community. "Furthermore," Marcus continued, "I'll be sharing my wife's experience with my network of business associates, my social media followers, and the local press. I think people should know how Sterling Motors treats potential customers." "Please, Mr. Johnson," Sterling begged, "let me make this right. Whatever your wife wants, any car on the lot, it's yours. No charge." Marcus looked at him with disgust. "You think this is about getting free cars? This is about human dignity, Mr. Sterling. This is about the fact that you judged my wife not by her character or her means, but by the color of her skin." Maya stepped forward again, her voice carrying the strength that came from standing up for herself. "Yesterday I told you that you would regret your decision. You laughed at me. Are you laughing now?" Sterling could barely meet her eyes. "Mrs. Johnson, I sincerely apologize for any misunderstanding yesterday. Please give me a chance to make this right." "A misunderstanding?" Maya repeated. "You called security to escort me out. You suggested I was using fake credit cards. You treated me like a criminal. Was that all just a misunderstanding? Marcus placed a protective arm around his wife's shoulders. Mr. Sterling, the damage is done. But I want you to understand that this isn't just about revenge. This is about accountability. Your behavior yesterday was unacceptable, and there are consequences for treating people the way you treated my wife. What can I do? Sterling asked desperately. How can I fix this? Marcus considered the question for a moment. Marcus Johnson stepped through the front door of his home, loosening his tie after a long day of business meetings. The familiar scent of his wife's cooking filled the air, but something felt different. Usually, Maya would greet him at the door with her bright smile and eager questions about his day. Instead, he found her sitting quietly at the kitchen table, staring out the window with an expression he had rarely seen before. Maya? Everything all right, sweetheart? Marcus asked, setting down his briefcase and walking over to her. Maya looked up at him, and Marcus could immediately see the pain in her eyes. After 15 years of marriage, he could read her emotions like an open book, and what he saw now made his heart clench with concern. Something happened today, Maya said softly. Gesturing for him to sit down beside her, Marcus pulled out a chair, his business instincts telling him that whatever had occurred was serious. He had seen that look in Maya's eyes only once before, years ago when she had faced discrimination at her first job out of college. Back then, he had been a struggling entrepreneur with more dreams than resources. Now things were very different. Maya told him everything, from the moment she walked into Sterling Motors to her humiliating escort out of the building. She spoke calmly, but Marcus could hear the hurt beneath her composed exterior. With each detail, his jaw tightened and his hands clenched into fists on the table. They treated me like I was nobody, Maya concluded. Like I was some kind of criminal just for walking into their showroom. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing what he had heard. His mind was already working through possibilities, calculating responses, considering options. This wasn't just about his wife being mistreated. It was about a pattern of behavior that he suspected had been going on for years at that dealership. You said the manager's name was Richard Sterling? Marcus asked quietly. Maya nodded. Richard Sterling. He acted like he owned the place. Marcus pulled out his phone and made a quick search. He does own the place. Sterling Motors has been in his family for 3 generations. They've got dealerships in 5 states and a reputation for catering to high-end clients. Well, now I know why they felt so comfortable being openly racist, Maya said bitterly. They probably think they're untouchable. Marcus reached over and took his wife's hand. Maya, I want you to know that what happened to you today is completely unacceptable. No one should ever be treated that way, regardless of how they're dressed or what they drive. I know, Maya replied. But knowing it's wrong doesn't make it hurt any less. What hurts me most, Marcus said, his voice growing harder, is that I've been so focused on keeping our private life separate from the business that I've left you vulnerable to this kind of treatment. I should have anticipated this might happen. Maya squeezed his hand. Marcus, we both agreed to live modestly. We both wanted to stay grounded and not let success change who we are. What happened today isn't your fault. Marcus stood up and began pacing around the kitchen, his mind racing through possibilities. Maya watched him, recognizing the expression he got when he was solving a complex business problem. She had seen that look countless times over the years as he built Johnson Industries from a small tech startup into a multinational corporation. Tell me exactly what you were planning to buy, Marcus said suddenly. I wanted to surprise you with a new BMW for your birthday next month. The 7 Series, the one you mentioned liking when we saw it in that magazine. Marcus stopped pacing and looked at his wife with a mixture of love and determination. You were going to spend your own savings to buy me a car? I've been saving for months. I wanted to do something special for your 50th birthday. Maya, you realize that Sterling Motors is probably the most expensive BMW dealership in the state. I know, that's why I chose it. I wanted to get you the best. Marcus felt his anger flare again, not at his wife but at the people who had treated her so poorly. Maya had been trying to do something wonderful for him, something that would have been a significant purchase for most people, and she had been humiliated for it. "I have an idea," Marcus said slowly. "But it's going to require us to change our approach to privacy." Maya looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" "I mean that tomorrow, Richard Sterling and everyone at that dealership are going to learn exactly who Maya Johnson is married to. And they're going to understand that their behavior has consequences." Over the next hour, Marcus laid out his plan. It was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its potential impact. Maya listened with growing amazement, as her husband outlined a response that would not only address her personal humiliation but potentially change the way Sterling Motors treated customers. "Forever. Are you sure you want to do this?" Maya asked when he finished explaining. "Once we go public with your identity, there's no going back to our quiet life." Marcus looked at his wife with absolute certainty. "Maya, I built this company to create value and opportunity. Part of that responsibility is using our influence to fight against injustice when we encounter it. What happened to you today is exactly the kind of systematic prejudice that keeps people down and prevents equality. But you've always said that the best way to create change is to lead by example, to build opportunities for others without making a big show of it. And we'll continue to do that," Marcus assured her. "But sometimes leading by example means standing up publicly when someone crosses a line. Sterling Motors crossed that line today." Maya thought about her husband's words. She had always admired his principled approach to business, the way he insisted on treating every employee and customer with respect regardless of their background. Johnson Industries had become known not just for its innovative technology, but for its commitment to diversity and inclusion. "What about the other customers who were there today?" Maya asked. "Some of them looked just as uncomfortable with what was happening as I was. Those people witnessed discrimination and said nothing," Marcus replied. "Tomorrow, they'll see what happens when good people choose to act instead of remaining silent." That evening, Marcus made several phone calls to key members of his team. He spoke with his head of public relations, his chief financial officer, and his personal attorney. Each conversation was brief but purposeful, setting in motion a chain of events that would culminate the following day. Maya spent the evening alternating between excitement and nervousness. She had never been comfortable with public attention, preferring to let her husband handle the spotlight while she focused on their charitable foundation and community work. Tomorrow would thrust her into a very different role. "Are you nervous?" Marcus asked as they prepared for bed. "Terrified," Maya admitted, "but also angry enough that I want to see this through." "Good," Marcus said, pulling her close. "Channel that anger into determination. Tomorrow isn't just about getting revenge on people who treated you badly. It's about sending a message that this kind of behavior is unacceptable and has real consequences." As Maya fell asleep that night, she thought about all the times over the years when she had experienced subtle forms of discrimination. The store clerks who followed her around, assuming she was shoplifting. The restaurant hostesses who tried to seat her in corners despite having reservations. The countless small indignities that she had learned to ignore or brush off. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, she wouldn't be just Maya Johnson, a woman shopping alone who could be easily dismissed. Tomorrow, she would be Maya Johnson, wife of one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the country. And Richard Sterling was about to learn the difference. Marcus lay awake long after his wife had fallen asleep, finalizing the details of his plan in his mind. He thought about the young man he had been when he first started his company, full of dreams and determination but lacking the resources to make a real impact. He remembered the people who had believed in him when he had nothing to offer but potential, and the people who had dismissed him because of where he came from. Success had given him many things, but perhaps most importantly, it had given him the power to stand up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. Tomorrow, he would use that power in a very public way, and Sterling Motors would never forget the lesson they were about to learn. Maya Johnson adjusted her simple cotton dress as she walked through the gleaming glass doors of Sterling Motors, one of the most prestigious car dealerships in the city. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the polished marble floors, and the smell of new leather and fresh paint filled the air. She had been saving for months to surprise her husband with a new car for his upcoming birthday, and today felt like the perfect day to make that dream come true. The showroom was impressive, with luxury vehicles positioned like pieces of art under bright spotlights. Mercedes, BMWs, and Audis sparkled under the carefully arranged lighting, their chrome bumpers reflecting the elegant interior design of the dealership. Maya felt a flutter of excitement in her stomach as she imagined her husband's face when she presented him with the keys to a brand new vehicle. She approached the reception desk where a young woman with perfectly styled blonde hair sat typing on a computer. The receptionist looked up briefly, her eyes scanning Maya from head to toe before returning to her screen without saying a word. Maya waited patiently for a moment, then cleared her throat softly. "Excuse me. I'm interested in looking at some cars today," Maya said with a warm smile. The receptionist glanced up again, this time with a barely concealed look of annoyance. "Are you here for the cleaning service? The manager's office is around the back." Maya felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment, but she maintained her composure. "No, I'm here as a customer. I'd like to speak with a sales representative about purchasing a vehicle." The young woman's eyebrows rose skeptically. She looked Maya up and down once more, taking in her modest dress, simple handbag, and comfortable walking shoes. "I think there might be some confusion. Our vehicles here start at $60,000. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at one of the used car lots downtown." The words hit Maya like a slap across the face. She had encountered prejudice before, but never so blatantly in a place of business. She took a deep breath, reminding herself of why she was there. "I understand your prices, and I'm prepared to make a purchase today. May I please speak with a sales manager?" Before the receptionist could respond, a tall man in an expensive suit approached the desk. His name tag read Richard Sterling, Sales Manager, and his cold gray eyes immediately fixed on Maya with the same dismissive expression as his employee. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, not bothering to address Maya directly. "This woman says she wants to buy a car." The receptionist replied with a slight smirk. Richard Sterling looked Maya over with undisguised contempt. "Ma'am, I think you may be lost. This is a luxury automobile dealership. We don't offer payment plans or financing for people in your ... situation." Maya felt her anger rising, but she kept her voice steady and professional. "Sir, you don't know anything about my situation. I have cash to make a purchase today, and I would appreciate being treated with the same respect as any other potential customer." Sterling laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the showroom. Several other customers turned to look at the commotion, their faces showing a mixture of curiosity and secondhand embarrassment. "Cash? For a $60,000 vehicle? Let me guess, you've been saving your tips from waiting tables?" The humiliation was becoming unbearable, but Maya refused to back down. She reached into her handbag and pulled out her wallet, extracting a platinum credit card and her driver's license. "I have excellent credit and the means to purchase any vehicle on this lot. Now, are you going to help me, or do I need to speak with the owner of this establishment?" Sterling barely glanced at the cards. "Lady, I don't care what kind of fake credit cards you've got. You're wasting my time and my customers' time. I'm going to have to ask you to leave before I call security." "On what grounds?" Maya asked, her voice rising slightly despite her efforts to remain calm. "Trespassing," Sterling replied coldly. "This is a private business, and I have the right to refuse service to anyone I choose. Now, please leave quietly or I'll have you escorted out." Maya looked around the showroom, noting how other customers were staring at her with expressions ranging from pity to disgust. Some were whispering among themselves, and she could catch fragments of their conversations. She realized that no matter what she said or did, these people had already made up their minds about who she was based solely on the color of her skin. "Fine," she said quietly, putting her cards back in her wallet. "I'll leave. But you should know that you've made a terrible mistake today." Sterling laughed again. "The only mistake would be letting you waste any more of my time. Security will escort you to your car." A large security guard appeared as if from nowhere, his hand resting casually on his radio. "Ma'am, I need you to come with me," he said in a tone that brooked no argument. Maya held her head high as she walked through the showroom, past the gleaming cars she had hoped to choose from, past the staring customers who had witnessed her humiliation. The security guard stayed close behind her, as if she were some kind of criminal who might suddenly bolt or cause trouble. As they reached the exit, Maya turned back to look at Richard Sterling, who was watching her departure with obvious satisfaction. "You'll regret this," she said simply. "I doubt that very much," Sterling replied with a dismissive wave. Maya walked to her modest sedan in the parking lot, her hands shaking as she fumbled with her keys. The security guard stood by the entrance, arms crossed, making sure she actually left the premises. She sat in her car for several minutes, trying to process what had just happened. She had been humiliated, dismissed, and treated like a second-class citizen simply because of how she looked. The prejudice had been so blatant, so unapologetic, that it took her breath away. She thought about all the times her husband had warned her about places like this, about people who would judge her before they knew anything about her. As she drove home, Maya's sadness began to transform into something else entirely. She thought about her husband, about his success, about the empire he had built through hard work and determination. She thought about the way he had always protected her from situations exactly like this one, and how he had probably anticipated that something like this might happen. Tomorrow, she decided, things would be different. Tomorrow, Richard Sterling and everyone at that dealership would learn exactly who they had dismissed so carelessly. Tomorrow, they would understand the magnitude of their mistake. Maya pulled into the driveway of her modest home, the same house she and her husband had lived in for years, despite their ability to afford something much grander. They had always preferred to keep a low profile, to live simply and invest their wealth wisely rather than flaunt it. But after today's experience, Maya began to think that perhaps it was time for a change in strategy. She walked into her house, setting her purse on the kitchen counter and looking around at their comfortable but unremarkable home. In a few hours, her husband would return from his business trip, and she would have to tell him what had happened. She dreaded that conversation, not because she was ashamed, but because she knew how angry it would make him. Her husband had worked his entire life to build something meaningful, to create opportunities not just for himself but for others. He had started with nothing and built a business empire worth billions of dollars, all while maintaining his dignity and treating every person he encountered with respect. The idea that his wife had been treated so poorly would infuriate him. Maya spent the rest of the afternoon replaying the events at Sterling Motors, thinking about every word that had been spoken and every look that had been exchanged. She wondered how many other people had been treated the same way. How many potential customers had been turned away, simply because they didn't fit the stereotypical image of someone who could afford a luxury vehicle. As evening approached, Maya heard the familiar sound of her husband's car in the driveway. She took a deep breath, knowing that the conversation she was about to have would change everything. Tomorrow would bring consequences that Richard Sterling and his team could never have imagined.